Hello and welcome to this week's Busk podcast. We're proud to present part 2 of episode 6. Last week saw company member Tommy Ogbaro and actor Shak Gabbidon-Williams discuss their experiences whilst at drama school. This week, Shak and Tommy delve into their experiences within the industry. If you missed out on part 1, it's available on our SoundCloud or YouTube channels. Links are available in our description below. And now, without further ado, over to Tommy and Shak.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shak. I think this is a nice segue into the industry part of this discussion. I'll try not to make it too long. So we've talked briefly about the industry. I feel like a great. So obviously, right now we're having a huge conversation about Black Lives Matter, and I think Black folk like myself and like my friends I've been talking to can feel a little bit burnt out thinking about it all the time. So it's great to have allies, but also you'll have a lot of people texting you, calling you just to sort of learn. The burden of having to teach people about racism, even in our industry, I think is a big one that we have. So were you about to say something, Jack?
No, I agree with you. I'm literally just saying, yeah. I was like, yeah.
Calm. So in regard to the industry, so I feel like Black and Asian actors, we face a special sort of situation wherein it's very easy for us to be the only ones of our race in the room. So first job I ever had, I was the only Black actor in a cast of 14, I believe. And that was Sweet Charity, though it was very, very lovely. And still felt very outside of the bubble in many times. There were many aspects of the culture that I didn't fully, and that was like my first actual musical theatre role as well. I felt like it took me some time to find my footing. Also, as the solo Black person there, I don't know if you get this sometimes when you're traveling abroad, Shak, but you almost feel a bit like a representative for your race.
Yeah. I feel like it's almost engraved in our minds by not just our parents, but by the older generation to kind of if you behave a certain way, they're going to feel a certain way about you, and you don't want that, especially when you're in a working environment. So you kind of feel like, oh, I need to kind of reserve myself and to kind of understand and know everyone and what they're like. Yeah. And then I kind of let a bit of my personality out. But before I let all of it out, I'm just going to test the water with this bit.
Yeah,
have some of this personality and see if that works. All right, let me try this side. And then, it shouldn't really be like that, but it's something that's engraved in us to kind of, it's almost a way of protecting us, I guess.
Yeah.
Of from being labelled a way that doesn't represent us at all.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You sort of have to drip feed who you really are sometimes when you don't feel fully comfortable in a rehearsal room or in a cast yet. I want to talk about culture, our culture, British culture. How white is seen as the default. So I think a lot of people, some audiences, automatically sort of pick out Black actors, especially in period pieces. I don't know if you remember, Benji, during Bruford, I think it was quite rare for Black. So we have a classic season followed by a London season, which is more contemporary. But classic season, when we did our Chekhovs and stuff, for the most part, the Black folk didn't really get any big roles in that.
No.
I'm trying, apart from maybe Tamika, and even still, she's not really the main role there.
It was only as we were leaving and as we've left, we've seen sort of that change and the choice of plays being more diverse.
Very much more diverse. But just press in general. I think literally yesterday there was an article called the RSC Romeo and Juliet, which I have actually, my friend Bally played Romeo in. They called it garishly diverse. And this is national press. So I'd love to discuss this sort of assumption that white is a default. Some people have this thing wherein they have to, if they see black actors, I feel, maybe it's just me being paranoid, but if they're not good, then they're token. I've felt sometimes that if I'm anything less than perfect, that leaves me open to fire.
Yeah, that's how I literally how I grew up. Every because I did a lot of Amdram growing up, because I did Lion King at 10, and then from then it was kind of like this is where my head's kind of directed at, so I'm just going to keep going with it. And the amount of casts that I've been in where I was the only black person. I remember doing Hairspray once, where me and my sister were the only actual black people in the cast. I think it was me, my sister, and the girl who played Myrtle Malcolm was mixed race, and it was an exchange thing. So the rest of the black people were all Maltese people because they had the tan. So I remember that moment and being like, and having to teach people how to move black, and I was like, I don't understand.
Yeah,
it's not like if you want people to move black or do black things, maybe try and grab in some black people who can do it then, instead of just settling for, they're darker toned than us, so that'll work.
That'll do.
So yeah, I had that really irritated me for a long time growing up, just kind of being asked. I remember being asked at one point to do Hairspray in 3 different parts of the country, pretty much. One was in Portsmouth for someone's friend's mum's Amdram show. I remember doing it in Wantage near Oxford. And it just like a lot of like, oh, can you come and do this for a bit? And then like, if I did it, never heard from them again.
Yeah.
Never checked on from them again or anything like that.
Like you have your black roles, and we won't call, even though you're great, we won't call you for anything else.
Yeah. And
sorry, carry on.
It literally made me feel at one point, I remember distinctly at about 15, 16, thinking that like I wasn't any good, like unless they wanted someone to be black. I remember feeling that like in my soul, and then I ended up being invited to go audition for it's a company in Oxford. It's an Amdram company called the Musical Youth Company of Oxford. I remember going there and I sang a song, and they got me in, and then we had Guys and Dolls, and Guys and Dolls came up, and I was like, all right, cool, this is it then, isn't it? I'm just going to be in the ensemble for the next year. I ended up getting Sky Masterson, and that was the moment where I was like, oh, you can actually do this and actually like break boundaries and not be confined to like your skin tone. So I think it's so important, not just for the actor themselves, but for the young people who might have a feeling of like, oh, maybe I want to be an actor one day, to see people who look like them in roles that maybe aren't necessarily supposed to be them. Like, I have to say, like, Dex Lee is one of the best examples of that. He did.
Dex is a monster, man.
I remember when I was in 3rd year, and I was looking at this guy doing like, oh, he's just played Danny in Grease, and now he's about to do Oklahoma, and now he's doing Five Guys. I was like, this guy was my hero in 3rd year, and like, he was probably like 2-3 years older than me. And like, yeah, he was. Seeing that really inspired me to kind of stop going, like, to get out of my head of this kind of, oh, I can only use rep that's got black songs in it. I can only do this, because it made me think, do you know what? I don't care. If I feel like I could do it, then I'm just gonna put it in my rep, and I'm just gonna audition for it. If they want to see me, great. If they don't want to see me, then fine. That's their own loss, I guess. But with what you're saying about if you're having kind of like a bad show, you kind of get labeled as like a token. Yeah,
but you're only there because of your race.
Yeah, and I think I do think though, like a lot of the time, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I think there's a
tokenism, because I think tokenism, and so like one whole section of my dissertation was that the tokenism and diversity are 2 completely different things. I think tokenism is a diversion from actually trying to achieve proper diversity. So diversity isn't just chucking one black person into a cast. That's not diversity. And hopefully the hope is that they're brilliant and that it's good and it's wonderful, and because they are just as human and can be equally as good. And I think Ian McKellen said there's no good or bad actors. There are actors who have good and bad performances. But just I think it's a lack of proactive action to sort of inject that diversity diegetically into the cast, into how we approach the rehearsal room, how you interact. So I think tokenism is a very real thing that that proactively harms Black people. I think.
Yeah, you're right. It's because we have to. I think these casting directors and producers and creatives need to understand that it's deeper than filling a quota.
Yeah.
If you're doing it to fill a quota, you're not doing it for the right reasons. And to be honest, I couldn't think of one Black or any person of color or of any other ethnicity that would want to be somewhere just because they tick a box.
Yeah.
If you,
completely.
I think a lot of people would rather just not be there. So I think it is important to differentiate filling the quota and providing lip service again, and the difference between that and actually bringing people together and actually trying to create something together, not just because everyone needs to. We have people who look like this and look like this because we're trying to look like we're diverse. Let's actually be diverse, and it has to come from the ethos of the production company that trickles down onwards onto other people.
Yes, absolutely.
That was my kind of biggest issue with the whole Black Lives Matter movement with theaters and production companies. And I remember at the time I did a tweet and I was so peed off and I kind of blamed producers, and it's deeper than just the producers because it's also the financial backers of these shows who might not want to kind of display this thought. But for shows like Lion King, for shows like Hamilton, for shows like Book of Mormon, you kind of it goes past this point of what your backers, because your show depends on these people. So if you can't be with them in their struggle, then don't employ them to make you money.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think, I think there's sort of, so one of my biggest fears after we leave this lockdown period is, it could go the complete opposite way, but I think theatres might just start trying to play it as safe as possible with what they do. And I just hope that Black actors are remembered Black and Asian and minority ethnic actors are remembered in that conversation that people are having right now.
I was wondering if we could touch on sort of audition processes, because that's something I don't think we've talked about as much.
Sure thing.
How can producers make audition processes from the casting breakdowns? Obviously, it comes from the way we look at shows and how we cast them. But how can we improve that and improving the actual audition process in the room? Because I can assume that you guys have had some interesting auditions in the 2 years you've been auditioning.
I've never had a massive issue in the audition per se. But that's mainly because like the shows that I've auditioned for, they kind of need. Like, I've usually auditioned for Black roles, so like it just has happened. That's how my career's kind of found its way so far. Like I auditioned for Seaweed, so everyone I saw around me were it was just Black people, and the creatives were all for this. They were part of this feeling of equality, and that they had these mindsets, because you don't direct Hairspray and disagree with the whole politics of it. So I've never had an awful audition into that, and never had a feeling of like not really being like, never felt uncomfortable in an audition in terms of race. All the issues I've ever felt have started on the jobs, and I think where producers and companies go wrong is like in Motown. I think there was a lack of thought that, maybe you lot are going to go through a bit of you're going to experience a bit of racism on this tour. I don't think it might have just been because the producers were white and they've never had to add that thought in their mind before. They've never had to think, maybe the digs I get, maybe the host doesn't, maybe they see my face and then they don't want me to be there. Maybe the host is racist. Maybe the host just will hate me because of who I am and not want me to be there. I have so many friends from Motown that clicked a link on Theatre Digs Booker, which is where you book things for tour. I'm sure everybody probably does know that. She booked something for tour and she didn't have a picture up on her profile, and they added her And then they asked to add her on Facebook. Add her on Facebook, saw her face. Oh, suddenly the room's not available. Cancelled it. Literally just cancelled it. And there's other moments that we had, and I think what I think we would have appreciated was just a bit of support on that front. But I
backing.
That white privilege kind of not, and I have to stress sometimes that white privilege is not something that happens on purpose.
Yeah.
I think the majority of the time, white privilege is something that just, you don't understand that you're doing it right now. It's just something that's happened.
Most people with privilege don't understand that they have that privilege until someone who doesn't points it out.
Absolutely, and I think that was a case of white privilege, not understanding that people go through this kind of thing and not kind of like getting people ready for it. Because like, I mean, I personally was kind of, my head was kind of set towards like this, because I've been on tour before and I've had these kind of like awkward experiences with people already. So I knew that a longer tour in a lot of places that are a lot more predominantly white, and I thought like it could go this way. So I was kind of a bit more prepared. But there was a lot of people who that was their first job and like weren't really. You kind of get, when it's your first job. I remember like when I was in Hairspray, I was just like kind of like, my head wasn't in anything but like, this is great, everything's great, and nothing kind of like came in my way and like made me feel uncomfortable until I went to a bar in Stoke and they didn't want to serve me because they didn't like me. So, and then like, then it kind of went back to normal. Like, oh yeah, remember you're black, almost. But yeah, I think what we need to do as like production companies, kind of find a way of safeguarding actors, especially touring actors, especially in shows like Motown and Lion King that do lots of national tours and very black dominated cast. Because when you go, like, I spoke to my friend Fred, who was in Kinky Boots on tour, and he said that we didn't really experience anything outside of work. It was a lot of things, a lot of microaggressions in work that he suffered with. Whereas us, because it was a full black cast, we didn't have any microaggressions. We just had the world to deal with outside. It was stuff from leaving the stage door and people coming up to me. I played Marvin Gaye, and not knowing who I was, like at all. Couldn't tell who I was from the person next to me. Asking both of us if we're Temptations. Asking someone across the road, like my friend Michael, who's bigger than me, like big muscly guy, asking him if he played Marvin. Asking the only people they could recognise was Diana Ross. And then, okay, brilliant. And it was just that kind of like, are you actually paying attention? Are you looking at these programs that you're asking us to sign? Are you cross-referencing our faces to the programs to our faces? Or are you just going, we're never going to understand, so we just have to ask you? And it was like stuff like that we had to deal with. I remember being in Sunderland and someone came on stage, and I remember hearing distinctly in the auditorium, I can tell you, when I say like, I remember I was stood on stage and I remember where the sound came from. It was up in the circle to my left, and some guy went, "Oh, for fuck's sake, another black person." What did he? I don't know what he expected when he went to go.
Do you know what he paid for?
Yeah, exactly. You're paying for the story of a black company, so I don't know what else you think is going to turn up. But he was pretty peed off that there was another black coming on stage.
Thank you very much, Shak, for that. But yeah, like in terms of auditions, I can't really think of much, but I think a lot of safeguarding can be done when the job starts, and just finding your actor's corner. That's what a lot of people just need to listen and know what, and your actors will tell you what they need, because they know what they need, and as long as you just have to try to help and provide that. I hate bringing up problems without solutions. And I think this one's a bit harder because I feel like there is a institutional sort of not maybe view, or that there is a culture surrounding theatre which is white dominated, and I feel like a lot of our problems, the lack of understanding of white privilege, like the British media has a lot of what's a responsibility to uphold. The fact that they use the word diversity, which is something we're meant to champion as some sort of dog whistle for predominantly white readers, to say, hey, avoid this, there's too many black people in it, etc. But like I think we are seeing a great culture shift there, I think the Royal Shakespeare Company did an amazing job calling out that newspaper on the language they're using and how disgustingly offensive it is. In terms of outreach, we have to go to them. We have to support people who see people with raw talent, something that can be nurtured. We have to try to give them as much support as possible.
Yeah.
Black role models. I don't think I've talked about it many times. I was privileged enough to have Adjuando direct me as Shylock in second year. And I, in terms of pivotal points in my life as an artist or how I see myself as an actor, I think I can very easily, clearly pin that. Having a black role model, playing a black Jew, having this role model who was like nurturing and catering, something I had for 2 years whilst at Bruford, was amazing. And she knew the experience, and she forced me to read more black theatre, to know my roots, where I came from, to know what shoulders I'm standing on, all those things that really I should have learned by myself, but like it took that push. But she was instrumental, and I don't know, you're probably not watching this, Adjua, but I'm forever thankful. I know £25 seems cheap for many people, but 18-year-old Tommy could only watch the £5 seats at the Globe.
Yeah.
So I'd love if you can get a more diverse audience, it will be easier to put on more diverse shows, and like that risk will start mitigating and getting less and less and less, and we can make that the norm.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, especially with shows like Hamilton right now. They're starting a scheme where kids from like kind of lower income households and lower like working class schools can kind of come and watch the show now, which is something that really they realise that as a show like that they should have been doing a long time ago. So I think
it's a duty.
Yeah, it's music that. This is the kind of show that will bring in black actors and young actors of colour that want to do something that's interesting, especially working class who kind of see this kind of theatre thing as like a kind of niche thing to do. When if you see a show like Hamilton, you kind of go, wow, this is actually, it's way more different than I thought it was going to be. Like to go along with what you're saying, I think the whole thing stems down to, again, the root of it is education. And I think something needs to change in our educational system, where we need to stop doing to the victor goes the spoils history lessons. Like, I think we need to do what Germany did in terms of completely kind of go, this is what we've done, and some of the stuff we've done is not good, and we need to kind of like address it at a young age, so you kind of know when you get older not to do it, and not to and these kind of thoughts in your head and these things that fester in your mind because you don't understand something not like you.
That's how fascism rises.
Yeah, it doesn't evolve into fear and prejudice and racism. So and like it's so important to educate everyone from the ground up about what everyone has been put through by the British Empire. I think I think at schools we need to start exposing what actually happened, and not just that Britain was great and we had an empire. Like, Britain has invaded a lot of places and taken a lot of land from people because they decided it was ours. We decided this is ours, so we're taking it. Like, and this is like the same people now the same descendants of these people are telling black people to go back to their country in America. So go back to where you came from, but you stole us from where we were, and you're not where you came from either. So I think it's a lot of miseducation and a lot of ignorance being like thrown around, and something needs to be changed, and it needs to start at the school system and at the school level. I think now is a time where we have to stop. I think not just white people, but I think we need to stop asking our black friends to educate us on race. There are too many references and Netflix documentaries and online
YouTube channels.
You can go and look at yourself instead of putting a person in the position where they feel like, oh, now I have to teach you. I think what's a lot more appealing to me and a lot more promising about society is when people are going out their way to do it themselves, the same way that we had to, because we get a month and all we get told is the same stuff. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Rosa Parks
sat on a bus.
And that's pretty much it for black people. And we'll just leave it there. But there's so much more history to it. There's a whole like stories of kingdoms and people and kings and queens and just and warrior kings and people who fought against slavery from way before it was an idea to white people to maybe end this stuff, because like slavery kind of ended because it was no longer people who had abolished slavery up north weren't making as much money as people down south. So that's why the Civil War happened.
The civil rights.
So I think it's education, and I think people need to stop being ignorant and thinking that like ignorance is bliss. You need to. I think if you want something to change, you have to go about and educate yourselves now. And like it's not me saying to my friends that like, oh, if you don't ever talk to me about anything, but it's more about I'd like to feel
come prepared. Have a discussion rather than you teaching them.
Exactly. I'd rather feel like we're talking openly about something and you have a general understanding over me having to just teach you everything, because I'm not here to teach you.
Thank you so much, Shak. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. Any closing statements?
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for sharing your thoughts today. And I mean, we've probably only touched the surface on a lot of issues and problems and things that we need to actively deal with. But yeah, I think I've taken a lot of things today that I need to do, like in terms of learning. And also, I think I wrote a list of things perhaps that we can do. We need to just champion people. We need to allow black people and minority people to tell their stories as well. And if you are white and you want to tell these people's stories, you need to learn yourself or work with people constructively to do that. And I think obviously education and outreach is something, I think, as a theatre company, that's something that we need to actively sort of try and help with and work with. But I think, as you know, this has only touched the surface. So I'm hoping that we can continue different discussions like this in the future. So thank you so much, Shak and Tommy, as well as always.
Thank you very much, Shak.
Thank you so much for having
appreciate it. No, it's wonderful. Thank you. No, thank you. Really appreciate it.
And thank you at home for listening too. Thank you for listening to our latest podcast, and if you missed out on any of the previous podcasts, they're all available on YouTube, SoundCloud, or our website, www.thebohemianstheatre.com. As we wrap up our online season of work called Busk, we're very excited to be continuing to create and record the podcast on a monthly basis. We'll be back next month with a brand new guest to talk about all things industry related and to talk about actor muso work. Please do follow us on all of our social media platforms, check out our website to keep up to date with the latest information. Thank you for listening today, and we hope to see you soon.